There's a popular book out now called How to Think Like a Freak. It was written by the authors of Freakonomics and Super Freakonomics of how to think differently in light of the changes going on in the world. How to think like a freak. One of the examples of someone who, or of a group who thought of a freak and is therefore used as an example of how to think like a freak is the 1980s rock band Van Halen. Now some people may think, well, they look like freaks, and also their music is probably freakish. So why would these authors use Van Halen as an example of how to think like a freak, to be effective? Well, whenever Van Halen introduced a new city to the tour, they would issue a 53-page rider, or kind of a manual, of what Van Halen wanted as part of their setup for their visit there. And on page 40 was something listed under the title Munchies, along with the technical and security requirements for the tour. So page 40 of Munchies, of how to ensure that Van Halen was very pleased, is that in their dressing rooms, they wanted a bowl of M&Ms with all the colors except brown. You may think, why? I mean, isn't this another example of an extravagant act by a prima donna rock band? No, they had a purpose to that. Now, in the 1980s, the concerts were getting more and more embellished. So there were great demands in terms of the stage, in terms of lighting, in terms of even pyrotechnics, and a lot of facilities couldn't handle that. And so they wanted to be sure that the requirements for the stage was going to be safe. And how to ensure that is that the promoter had to read the whole rider. If they missed that element of the brown M&Ms in that bowl, that meant they did not read the whole rider. Therefore, Van Halen would go meticulously through the setup of the stage, made sure that it was safe, made sure that all the lighting and electrical was safe, and made sure all the pyrotechnics were safe. Because if any one thing was missed, it could be disastrous. And also to prevent people from having a full experience of a great Van Halen concert. So little things do make a difference in terms of full experience. And this is what Van Halen realized, okay, if there are no M&Ms in the bowl in our dressing room, that meant they're doing the little things right, and it'll therefore be the full concert experience. Likewise with us, in the hands of Jesus, a little fills up many. So the one who ultimately fills us up is, of course, Jesus. I mean, that's why we're here today. We could be doing so many other things. We want the Lord in our life. We want to be filled. And this is what God does. Now, the beginning of today's gospel has that Jesus has heard the news that his cousin, John the Baptist, has been beheaded. And he wants to go to a place to grieve, as all of us would want to do if we lose someone who's very close to us in death. But the crowds want to encounter Jesus. And what does Jesus do? He does not turn them away. He receives them. He heals their sick. He had compassion for them. Another act of a compassion of God is that this God feeds his people. And so this is not only an allusion to what Jesus does with the feeding of the 5,000 plus the men and women, but also the very fact that if this Jesus is God, he's going to do what God did. And so one example of God feeding his people is in Exodus chapter 16, which God gave the Israelites manna from heaven to feed them as they wandered in the desert for 40 years. Also, another example of how God nourishes his people with very little is the prophet Elisha feeding 100 men with meager rations in the second book of Kings. So if God is going to fill up his people, well, he's going to feed them, but he needs something. And so the disciples realize, hey, this is a big crowd here. Because at 5,000 men plus the men and women, send them away to feed, that they can be fed themselves. But Jesus says, you feed them. You give them something to eat. All we have are 5 loaves and 2 fish. Well, Jesus receives them. And what Jesus does is not only looks to the past in terms of the nature of God feeding his people, filling them up, but also looks to the future of the Eucharist. So Jesus received the gifts of the people. He looked up to heaven, blessed them, broke them, and gave them to his disciples. And what's remarkable in the story is that it says that there were 12 baskets full of fragments, an overabundance. So God does feed his people with the little that he receives from his disciples. So a little in the hands of Jesus becomes a lot to fill up many. And what about us? I mean, this is nice to hear this story from 2,000 years ago, but what about us? Does Jesus really take what little we have and fill up many? So one example is what we've been able to do in our little parish. That we really have so little, and yet we're able to do so much. Like one example is Angels on High. So the mountain climb is next Saturday, and we realized, well, we've already fundraised almost $65,000 from this little idea. Not only that, but in the ways that we've been able to support the needs of our community, whether it's helping persons with dignity, it's helping feed the hungry, or a number of other things we've been able to do. Because what little we have, we give to the Lord, and he fills up many. And why does Jesus want to fill up many? Well, the word that Jesus that's used when it says that the 5,000 were filled and there are 12 baskets full, it's a very specific Greek word, which is chorazo. And St. Matthew only uses that when he refers to the 5,000, the feeding of the 5,000, feeding of the 4,000, but more importantly, refers back to the Beatitudes. The Beatitude that, blessed are you who hunger and thirst for righteousness, you will be filled. So the idea is that what we give to the Lord is supposed to feed not only those who are physically hungry, but emotionally and spiritually hungry. And this is what our task is as a parish, is that wouldn't it be nice to have the 12 baskets of extras and keep it to ourselves? In the mandate for every Catholic, especially at the end of Mass, go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. You can also use this synonymously. You give them something to eat. I mean, we're the luckiest people on the face of the earth. And the Lord has given us his word, his body and blood, and the mandate to go out. Well, you say, look, we have so little as a parish or as an individual. The Lord says, you give them something to eat. And I'm sure we can list many people in our world, even in our own spheres of influence, who hunger. And we only have to watch TV or see the news site to see what's going on in Syria, Iran, Gaza, Israel, Ukraine, Russia. What's going on. We can look at the examples here in Calgary, in Chestermere. I'm so little, I have so little, and how can I do much? Well, we have to give it to the Lord. And he could do so much to fill up minutes. But I mean, to do so is really to think like a freak. I think one of the great saintly freaks, one of the greatest of the 20th century is Mother Teresa, who said, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And that's really the task, is to give what little we have to the Lord, and he will fill up many. So to really think like Jesus, think compassionately, to feed, is to think like a freak. But we can think like a freak when we do the little things with great love. We give to the Lord what little we have, and it becomes much to fill up many. And a wonderful example is Van Halen. They wanted to give a great concert experience, the fullest experience they could to their concert goers. But in order to do so, they had to make sure that everything was going to be safe for them and also for the crowd. And one way to indicate that was the brown M&Ms. They went to the concert dressing room and realized there are brown M&Ms here. Someone hasn't done the little things well. So this week, let's look at the example of Van Halen, and also the example of Jesus. To do the little things, and to offer the little things, but little we have to the Lord. And through that, they will fill up